Hey gardeners, it's the very end of May 2020, and I've gotten a lot of questions recently about roses and how to care for them when it's hot like this. Even though we are not officially summer yet, our highs have gone up to 118 out here in the Phoenix, Arizona area. So I have about 21 hybrid tea varieties here. Many of these are South African varieties that I got from a Ludwig's rose branch that was in the Phoenix area. They have since moved on. They're no longer in business. But these were adapted to high heat. So they can stand up to dry, hot summers a lot better than some of the other varieties of roses out there. So here's one of those varieties. This one's Spiced Coffee. You can see even in these hot temperatures, the leaves are not burnt. And even though the blooms are small, they're not burnt either. So a variety like this is going to be able to be planted in full sun. Now, if you have the choice and you can provide your roses afternoon shade, I would definitely go for that. This planting out in my yard was just to see how they would do in full sun. A rose is going to appreciate relief from the heat at the end of the day, if possible. All right, let's just talk about new plantings. As you can see in front, there's a small rose here. This was a mail order variety, Lasting Love, from Heirloom Roses out in Oregon. This was planted in March, so it's been in the ground for a couple months. Suggest not planting your roses in the worst month of the year, which is June. You can do that. I did that with a lot of these varieties, but you're going to give it a better shot to not go into shock and to really root before the heat comes on. Now you can see this rose, as small as it is, has no leaf burn to it. It is the pink to red variety, so in the high heat, those tend to burn. As you can see, the petals are burnt a bit around the fringes. And the reason this one is looking healthy is because the soil is very amended in this spot. You can see on the top I've got a good amount of pine mulch, going fairly deep. So almost about a finger length. And then the soil itself down below is really pretty rich humus at this point. And how you achieve that is time, irrigation, and amendments. So before you plant a rose, I highly suggest digging your hole, adding half cactus soil to your half clay soil, adding mycorrhiza, adding some azomite, worm castings, and then irrigating that hole every day, deep soaking it until you have perfect drainage. You should not have water sitting in a planting, no matter what it is. Rose, fruit tree, it should drain down within a couple minutes of applying water. Speaking of watering, this gets hit with water twice a day. It's getting hit at 6 a.m. around that time, basically before the sun comes up, or very early in the morning, and then at the worst point of the day. So we're talking 3:30, 4 p.m. at the height of the heat. And I've got basically a vortex bubbler that saturates this entire ring. So all the soil is getting soaked. If you only water once a day or you only do it in the morning, these will fry up. Once the sun is down, they really like to have their leaves cool down. Feeding. Do not try to feed this a commercial food. It's going to burn it up. These still need food in order to grow and to root. So what I use for the first year is BR61. It's one that has a high phosphate or middle number, so it's going to allow it to bloom a lot for you, but more importantly, it's going to allow it to lay down roots. It's a water-soluble food, so the plant's able to uptake it right away. It's not time-released like these other granular foods. Another option is to feed these with fish fertilizer. It's another good choice that's not going to burn up the plant, and it's going to be able to uptake those nutrients right away. So just some tips on a new planting. Let's also talk a little bit about maintenance. My roses probably take the most amount of my time to maintain in the yard. They're definitely high maintenance plants. You have to deadhead these, so when the bloom expires, like this, or even like this, you're going to want to cut those off, because if you leave them on, what'll happen is the stem that's attached to it will blacken and die. And as you can see, there are a lot of expired blooms. I haven't gone through and removed these blooms yet. This is a weekly process for me, and the amount of blooms on these roses right now is what I generally get this time of the year each week that I have to come through and clip off. So this is like a 2-hour investment every week with the 21 rose bushes I have growing here. Roses are definitely doable. Just be aware of the work that's involved to keep them looking their best. And also that summer is tough. It's very hot here. These varieties are going to just kind of get through the season. Really, fall and winter are the seasons of the year where your hybrid tea roses are going to look their best in this climate. Unlike other climates where, that's usually when the roses start defoliating because of their cooler temperatures. Our roses here don't actually ever defoliate. It doesn't get cold enough for that. You don't need to frost protect these. So just finished all the cleanup work on these roses. Let's just take a quick look at each variety, see how they're standing up to the sun. This is Wedding Bells. See, the rose looks pretty good. It's definitely gotten smaller in the heat, but it does not burn up all too much. The leaves are looking good on this one. Okay, this one's Ingrid Bergman. It does struggle a little bit in the heat. It tends to burn the petals, as we saw. Foliage looks pretty good though, overall. This one is Giver of Hope, South African variety. Very thick petaled, very glossy, thick leaves on this variety. Because it's a white, cream colored rose, these do tend to burn on the edges. But sturdier than a variety like JFK. More heat tolerant. This is another South African variety called the Yellow. This rose is unusual in that it actually looks malformed in the wintertime. It loves the heat. And you can see a perfect yellow rose on this variety. There's no burn, and a very prolific bloomer. These all are actually. As long as you feed your roses, you should be getting tons of blooms. This is the classic variety, classic red rose called Chrysler Imperial. Because it's a red rose, again, it's going to have some burn around the edges, but looks pretty good. Firefighter. I don't know that this is a South African rose. I did get it from Ludwig's, and it stands up to the heat nicely. JFK we looked at before. This one is very sensitive to heat. Even the leaves look damaged. Another classic variety, Mr. Lincoln. Very fragrant rose variety. This one will suffer some burn on the petals, again, because this is a red variety. Actually looks more pink at this moment with high heat. It loses that deep red coloring that you typically see on it. Chicago Peace does remarkably well here. and actually nice big blooms. Not really seeing any burn to them. This one seems to do well. This is a unique purple hybrid tea rose that's a South African variety called Zulu Royal. This one does very well in high heat. Blooms shrink, of course, just like the others, but no burn. And an unusual color. Remember me, very tiny blooms. You can see they're very shrunken. Fragrant Cloud. Nice variety, does well in the heat. It will get some burn on the petals at times, but overall handles it pretty well. Monica is another hybrid tea variety. Flowers really shrink up in the high heat. This one will get some burn on the petals. Pink Peace, probably my most sensitive to the heat. This one will do quite well in winter and fall, but does not do well in the summer. You can see, similar to JFK, we have a lot of leaf burn here. And this one is more sheltered even. It's got a fig tree there. It's got a big white sapote overhead, giving it some filtered light, but despite all that, this one gets burnt up in the heat. Spice Coffee does remarkably well in the heat, another South African variety. One of my favorites. This will actually look very lavender in cooler times, and then it becomes more of a creamy brown to pink in the warmer times of the year. Perfume Delight stands up to the heat pretty well. The blooms definitely shrink. They're about 5 times the size in the cooler times, but it's still able to bloom fragrant roses in this kind of heat. This one is called Deja Blue. These blooms are going to be smaller in general, but definitely smaller in the heat. This one takes the heat well. This is another Ingrid Bergman. You can see there's some malformation even to the new roses coming in. Again, this one's a little bit more sensitive. And this is one of my best performers in the heat. This is called People's Princess, another South African variety. It seems to love the heat. You know, beautiful coloring on it. Even though it does have more of the creamish pink color, these do not burn. Very nice form. So we'll say it's worth the investment if you're going to put all the time and energy into your rose, that you get a good variety. You get one that's proven to do well in our climate, and you buy it from a nursery that's going to give you a quality plant. You know, I think it's very worthwhile to spend the extra money, go to a reputable nursery. Don't buy your roses at Lowe's or, you know, some big box store that's probably just buying them on discount, and not because they're the best, most healthy plants. You know, go to a nursery like Barrage in Phoenix, or you can mail order these. I wouldn't do it this time of the year, but any other time when, you know, our temperatures aren't that high. Heirloom Roses is a great place to go. I've gotten a lot of varieties there. Hope the tips were helpful and you enjoyed the tour. Thanks for watching and happy gardening.